Hello, everyone, and it is the 21st of June. Happy Father's Day. Happy solstice. I forget the other name for it. So, I have on a Sun Ambulance t shirt, and so I'm going to talk a little bit more about my background in music. Thank you, folks, for being interested. I didn't realize it had been so long that I'd spoke about things that it was like almost like I had never. So let me talk a little bit more. Also, it does seem that people need, not people, but it is true that when something is not put up in our view, then we forget it's there. And when I mentioned that I hadn't gotten any record sales, I got a few. Thank you, folks. It is still part of how I'm making a living. My new part-time job, what I'm getting paid to start with, is pretty low. So anyway, I have to put it all together. Anyway, some more music trivia for you about some bands that come from Omaha that you sometimes see their records on the market. One of those bands is the Better Beatles, and this is a copy of the single that they put out, I'm Down and Penny Lane. The Better Beatles are friends of mine. Dave Nordine still lives in Omaha, and he is one of the main people behind the band. Jay Rosen moved away a long time ago. He had a band called the Muskrats, as well as this, that got some notoriety, I think, with Dr. Demento. But they were just friends, and I say that I played shows with them. I don't remember. I know that I was playing concurrently at the same time as the Better Beatles were going, and because the scene, if you want to call it that, the punk new wave scene in Omaha was so small, I wouldn't be surprised if we did some shows together, at least one. And they signed it for me. Jay and Dave signed it for me. The other thing that I have, though, and I'm pretty sure I must have got this from Dave Nordine, is I have a test pressing of it. Test pressings are collectible. Not every test pressing is collectible. Obviously, test pressings of notorious records are more collectible. But I dare say this is a collectible test pressing, as the Better Beatles record has become collectible. So that's what I wanted to share. And then another band out of Omaha who are good friends. Unfortunately, the leader of the band was murdered. Buck Naked and the Bare Bottom Boys. Now, I'm mentioning them while I show you this because Buck, who was originally named Phil, and we became friends in high school. They had several bands before he settled on Buck Naked. And one of the bands that turned into Buck Naked was Bump Fuzz. Bump Fuzz made a split single with Calypso Machine Gun. Here's an original copy of it, Calypso Machine Gun. And on the other side is Bump Fuzz, which is actually Buck Naked and the Bare Bottom Boys. I actually have Buck's autograph on this, as well as Stinky and Ahmed. I still see Stinky, Boris, we call him Boris. He lives out in San Francisco, actually, hoping that his restaurant got shut down. I hope good things happen to him. But this is another band that friends of mine. The record is kind of collectible. Matter of fact, Buck Naked recorded their first demo in my basement studio at the time. I had a little 4-track cassette set up in my old house's basement, and I recorded Buck Naked there. I recorded NoFX. Yeah, the punk rock band NoFX recorded in my basement. A few other folks recorded there too. That reminds me, when it comes to my singles, I was telling you about folks of note that have my records. Chris and Cozy of Throbbing Gristle have copies of my first single. I have pictures of me giving them copies. That was fun. Chris was really into it. He really liked the artwork, and so we had a nice conversation. So there's that, and then someone asked me to talk a little bit more about digital sex, and I will a little bit. A while back, I made a video telling the story of the band, and I let loose. I had to delete the video. It upset some people to the point that someone wanted to scare me, saying, you know, you could get a lawsuit against you. And it was not that I said something wrong. I told the truth, and it really upset people. People don't like being the truth being told the truth being told about them. So this time, I will not do what I did then, because I unloaded a lot of emotions. People who are in bands or who have been in bands know how it can go. Sometimes breakups are worse than marriages. You start out together all rosy-eyed, and as you get to know each other, people's real backsides start to show, people's true agendas start to show. People change in the groups, just like in marriages. You know, it's not so much that we change, but our true nature emerges, and things can get ugly. So the story of digital sex does start with me, and I've been given a lot of shit over the years from the singer Steve Sheehan, and I'll say these things, I'll be nice about it, but I will still keep telling the story because it's rocky. You know, he used to give me shit when we were still talking and about how egotistical I was about the band, and it's like, well, I'll accept that. You know, this for me was an accomplishment. I don't think he understands what it would mean to a black kid from Omaha, where everything that black people does is discouraged and discounted. To have come up with this band idea, Digital Sex, and to have gotten it off the ground means a lot to me, meant a lot to me then, and I wanted to make sure people knew who was responsible for what. I started the band, and the way that the band started was after Norman and the Rockwells broke up. I don't exactly know why. I do know I had a falling out with Dean Dovmeyer in the band. I don't know that that had anything to do with the breakup. It may have. But shortly after that, I remember this much. Bobby Gass, good to hear from you. And yes, indeed, the Geritol generation. Here we go. Memory lapses. I remember this. I can still remember the day or days leading up to posting the ad. But I got an inspiration somehow that I could do a band of my own. And the bands that mentally were telling me that I could do this were bands I was listening to at the time. And those bands were specifically Joy Division, Wire, XTC. Those bands were the mental inspiration for thinking I could do something on my own. Now, when I put the ad up, I made an ad and put it up in the record store. Just put up a couple in the record store and a music store. And what I said is I'm looking for adventurous minded people to make music with. Anything from Genesis, Peter Gabriel, to Yellow Magic Orchestra, to Japan, to Joy Division, Wire, XTC. No one responded to that ad except for Steve, and that's how Digital Sex got started. When I met Steve, I recognized him because I had noticed him in record stores before. He has a look. He's a good-looking guy. So I noticed him. We vibed on David Bowie and on the bands that I mentioned. He was huge into Lou Reed and Velvet Underground, and I wasn't. I recognized Lou's influence, but I've never been a fan. So, but because I recognized that, we had that in common. We jammed. Steve had like an organ, like a wind organ, and we jammed. And it's like, you know, he couldn't really play much, but there was a vibe, and he also had the look. The other component of the band was that John Tingle, the guitar player who ended up being in Digital Sex, lived with me at the time. We had been friends since our teens. John is a very good guitar player. He wasn't interested in what I was writing or getting into. He was real open about that. He didn't give a shit about Joy Division or post-punk music. But he wasn't doing anything else. So I said, sure, I'll play. And that was kind of how I got the drummer too, Greg Tishless, through another musical association. But the music, when we started, I was inspired. The meeting with Steve, see, I give credit where credit's due, and this is part of why there's this icy silence between Steve and I. I'm ready to break it, and I've tried to talk to him several times in the last couple of years. He won't even look at me when I see him in public. But I was inspired by meeting Steve, and I just started writing. And I have the cassettes. See, I can prove all this, I still have the cassettes of me playing all the instruments and coming up with rough vocals, even ideas, that started the band Digital Sex. Just right quick to shorten the story, the reason why things fell apart was I was doing poly substances. I was doing a lot of everything from acid to coke to speed, always smoking a lot of weed. And once things started to seem to get rolling with the band, I did what a lot of people do, is I did more drugs because of the trip in your head. And Steve being more business oriented, he was taking things on. I let him, got to the point where he basically took over the band. I actually got kicked out of my own band at one time. I forget the exact circumstances. I know it had to do with me being irresponsible. Strange trip, But when I talk about Digital Sex, I adamantly say that was my band. It was our band, but it was my band, okay? I started it. And the race thing has something to do with why it's important for me to say that. It was my band. I'll say it again. This black guy from Omaha, Nebraska, one of the most redneck states in this country, comes up with this band that people were comparing us to REM and The Cure. And that was our sound. I wasn't trying to rip them off, but those were reference points. Really not even The Cure, But then we broke up a bunch of times. When we broke up for good, seemingly, Steve and I had one more conversation saying we should preserve this music. And that's what led to the making of this album. The making of the album and the financing of it led to a whole nother rift between Steve and I. I won't get into it here because it's settled. I paid for the studio time and he paid for the manufacturing. It took me years to pay off the studio, but I did. Very proud of this album, Digital Sex. Because of publishing and because of the technical definition of a song, Steve got the majority of the royalties off of this because of the words, I wrote the music, but it's the words that are considered published songs, which, as I discovered all this as a young man, just made me crazy, And when I quit Digital Sex, I was going to quit music for good. It hurt so much, the things that I learned. But in retrospect, I'm really proud of this album. We sent it all over the place, all over the world, and got on radio, college radio, got reviews. We never left the country, but we never did a big tour. But we played throughout the Midwest. Got some songs, put on some compilations. One in particular was Music from the Dead Zone, put out by, he's no longer with us, but the guy that started this label had some association with the Sex Pistols as well. But Digital Sex got a song on here along with Four Against. Some other bands that you might have heard of that are on here are The Haters and Cyclones and Hunting Lodge and Smirsh. So getting Digital Sex, getting a song on this album, again, was another feather in the cap for me, another record. We made another record. I was doing multiple projects, like I said, at that time, and I'll just leave off of the Digital Sex story right now. There's so much to tell there. If there's more interest, I can tell more later, but I'll leave up there because I was doing multiple projects. Another album that I played bass on at the time was Atomic Breathing. The man on the front is Dixon LeBron. In my opinion, Dixon was the original emo kid out of Omaha. Conor Oberst was the one that got discovered because he was just a little kid singing and screaming. But Dixon was, before him, someone I identify as the the proto model of Conor Oberst. Young, physically very cute, but had a vision, a burning inner vision that he tried to express through his music. This was an artist who, even when I played these songs and played bass on them, I didn't fully understand what I was doing with Dixon, because his idea is so singular. But Atomic Breathing, this came out I think in 1985. This is another album. If you're interested in collecting my discography, I play bass on 2 tracks on this, and you can find this. You can find it. Just to wrap up this particular one, I want to talk a little bit more about some other music I've been playing, because I've been playing a ton this weekend. Some other stuff I got into was some Klaus Schulze, thanks to the VC. I listened to Irrlicht last night. I believe this is his very first solo album. Showed it online, and apparently the original copies of this came with a printed score. And someone asked me if I had the printed score. I don't. I got this used years ago. So apparently they're going to scan it and print it and scan it and send it to me so I can have it. But this, I love Klaus Schulze's work when I'm in the mood for it. I also listen to Body Love by Klaus Schulze, movie soundtrack. Good stuff. Steve Reed and Kieran Hebden. Steve Reed was a jazz drummer, died not too long ago. Kieran Hebden of Fortet. They did a collaboration of improvisations, and they really work. They really work well. This is real enjoyable. Real enjoyable. It's just something you got to hear, you know. I mean, maybe I could think of Can, the sound of Can. Here's another album that I'm on. Steve and I had done a well, it wasn't a collaboration. I'm going to tell the story again. This might piss Steve off. I used to do a lot of recording like I do now. And he was over one day, and I had this music, and I was just playing it for him. And one thing led to another, and he ended up playing a couple notes on it, on the Casio tone. Steve was an enterprising man at the time, and he said, let's get this released. So we ended up getting it released on this limited edition French compilation called Psychomania. And it came out in a limited edition of, many came out in silk screen covers, hand silk screened. A couple had actual covers. But the kick of it was, I said, you know, give us, I want, you know, please, I want credit, you know. I didn't get credit. It was only credited to Steve. But literally everything you hear, except for 2 notes on the Casio tone, is me, bass, drums, you know. And when this came out, it got reviews over in Europe. And all the reviews remarked about the fabulous drumming, which was me, uncredited. Another one of the things that has to do with some of the bitterness about the Digital Sex saga. The last thing I'll say about it, because it still is, you know, not a wound anymore, but it's still a part of my life that I'd like to have settled. Singers in bands, especially because people, a lot of the audience are not musicians and don't know anything about making music. When a band has a singer, they just assume the singer is the leader. And that's what happened with Digital Sex, and that idea got run away with, okay? Which I didn't appreciate, and to this day will say bluntly, don't appreciate, you know. There would have been no Digital Sex had I not started it, and there would have been no music had I not written it or realized it for Steve, because he can write. He had to bring his ideas to me, and I would make music out of them. So, again, I'm happy to say, for the longest time, it seemed in my mind that the biggest thing I'd ever done was the band Digital Sex. That is definitely not true. It's part of it's a chapter in a long line of things that I have done and I'm still doing. I'm really happy to say that. And that was another one of the things. I'll say it publicly. And if you don't like it, Steve, that's too bad. You did do it. There's times after the band would break up and you'd be upset at me about something, and you said it to me a few times. Well, and you would say it like I'm supposed to own it. Well, we haven't done that much. What have we ever done? What have you ever done? You know, those kind of comments stick. You know what I'm saying? When people say things that they want to make sure it hurts you, well, when it does, it sticks, and that's one of them. You know, and I'm just happy to say that it was not true when it was said. What have you ever done? And it's even less true now. So, on public record, because I know a lot of people watch these videos, and I'm sure that someone is going to make sure that if he doesn't watch me now, someone will make sure that Steve sees this video now. I'd like to clear the air. I own my responsibilities to the history of what happened. I'm clear, you know. So, whenever you want to talk, my friend, I'm right here. I own what I did and what I didn't do. I own what I did right. I own what I didn't do right. Be nice to see that reciprocated. It's never been reciprocated. It has never been reciprocated. So there you go. That's the latest. You know, I've got more. Last thing I'll say record-wise, I'll probably talk a few more minutes. You know how it goes. Pitchfork blog site recently made a documentary on the making of Souvlaki by Slowdive. This album was panned by the critics when it came out. And I love Slowdive, especially their first few singles. When their albums came out, I was underimpressed. I didn't think the albums were very good. They have grown in stature over time. What they were trying to do has become clearer. This is not a great album. This is a good album. And Rachel and Neil, who I met about this time, had broken up, but they were still in the band together. And so there's the song Dagger, one of the standout tracks on here. It's about their breakup, you know. So I'm sure this was a difficult time for them to be together, but played this several times this weekend, especially the song Dagger. Fantastic. Fantastic. Last thing I'll say is, isn't it interesting historically how black people have been painted to be such devils and mean people and almost apes and not to be trusted and this and that. And here we have the mass murder, terrorist, hate crime down in Charleston by the young man who, to me, very obviously had mental issues, as well as carrying on the sick legacy of racism that America refuses to admit to. Look at what the victims' families have done. They're taking the high road. They forgive him because we're human beings. Because of the problem that history has, which is we have a group of people who historically have had an advantageous position, are holding on to it. A lot of the silence about racism is an acknowledgement of, yeah, we got the ball and we're keeping it. And one of the ways that you do that is you make the enemy, you paint him a ugly picture, which is what has been done to the black race. It's totally false. We're just human. We're just as fucked up as the people who keep pointing the finger at us, you know, and scapegoating us. And the point I'm trying to say is the families of those that died are showing you, once again, who the real decent people are. We're all human, but look who's acting human here. Also, notice how the elite-owned press, notice how they keep trying to play this out. And for those that have ears and have minds to discern, you can clearly see how they keep continually trying to paint a biased picture, try to distort the facts, try to load up things in their favor, telling blatant lies, showing the dark, evil heart of greed and profit, how it puts things and desire over human lives. Hundreds of years of this has gone on, and it's still going on. It doesn't matter that my people hurt each other and kill each other. There's not a fence that separates us, that black people kill people more than white people kill people. That's bullshit. It's a perception that's been fed that's false. We're all people. We all kill. This really needs to end, this charade of white elite privilege. And I won't call it that because I don't want racism to go on. I want it to end. But it has to be addressed by everyone for that to happen. It's not going to. It's not going to happen. A lot of folks who swear they're not racist are enjoying the fruits of that racism, and so therefore they don't speak up, which implicates them. The time for change is now, and it involves all of us. You know, I'll invoke something out of the Bible. Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, which one is America? Sodom or Gomorrah? Or both? That's where we're at. Have you ever read that stuff? That's where we're at right now in America. In the shitter. And it's up to us. No leaders can fix this. They absolutely will not fix this. The leaders will absolutely make sure they get paid. They will not stand up for us. It's up to us. If anything good is going to happen, it's going to be up to us.